afternoon, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the joint Institute of Quarrying, Institute of Asphalt Technology online conference. The focus of today's event is on sustainable procurement. So without further ado, I'll just introduce you to Chris Reid. Chris has worked on HS2 for the past 6 years and gained an in-depth understanding of strategic goals and objectives and aspirations to deliver value for money and a lasting legacy. Very much aligned to his own passions and values, this has put Chris in a privileged position to help develop and implement best-in-class sustainability-focused strategies, procedures, tools, and systems that are setting EKFB apart. And I know Chris will explain more about EKFB during his presentation. And over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming and listening to me, and thank you for the Institute of Quarrying for inviting me to deliver this presentation. And hopefully you'll find at least some, if not all, of what I have to share with you useful or informative, and hopefully be something you can take away into your own businesses in terms of implementing best practice in sustainable procurement. So just a little bit more about me. Apologies for the rather large pixelated picture of my face, but that's me, Chris Reid. As was just said, I've been involved in HS2 for best part of 6 years now, if not over. I've lost track, but I was very much involved at the front end of the project and part of what was at the time the CEK joint venture work winning team, bidding for both the enabling works and the main work civils contracts. Then it went to become EK, which was successful in being invited to deliver the early contractor involvement contract for lot C23 of the HS2 main civils works, and to build some resilience into our joint venture for delivery stage. We're now a 4-way joint venture comprising of Eiffage, Kia, Roval and BAM. But yeah, part of that, along that journey, it's put me in a sort of a privileged position really, and given us a luxury of time, which you don't usually get on major construction projects, to really kind of refine our strategy and our approach to delivering procurement, supply chain management. And that's really puts us in a position to implement some what we believe are best-in-class procedures, processes, and a toolkit that are really starting to leverage some value and deliver some impact for our client. My background, I've been in procurement supply chain for a long time now, since about 2006, so over 15 years experience, and started my career in aerospace and defence before moving on into various sort of industrial manufacturing and ultimately global sourcing for Ford Motor Company, before joining Carillion back in 2014. And yeah, so I've been in a number of sectors and very much saw a big opportunity in the construction space, given that they're fairly behind some of our peers in other sectors, and that's very much driven by the nature of the beast and the fact that construction projects tend to have a short life cycle, and we were in this continuous loop of design and build, and it's very difficult in that sort of dynamic space to refine sometimes what we do and invest in innovation and doing things differently. So yeah, having the time we've had to approach this project differently, I think it will really help us raise the bar in delivering things differently in the construction industry and infrastructure. Just a point there around my passion really, and as much as I love being involved in a prestigious project like HS2 and being involved in delivering major infrastructure projects, what really gets me out of bed in the morning is the ability to make a difference. And I really do believe that in the construction space, we really all do have that opportunity to make a difference, and we're all empowered and responsible for doing so, and through the business decisions we make. That's enough about me. Before I get into the detail into how we're delivering sustainable procurement at EKFB, I just wanted to touch on our sort of overarching procurement supply chain division, which is something we put in place as part of our bids into HS2, and really sort of sets the tone of everything we do. It's fundamental to all of our procedures, decision making that we do for our procurement and supply chain management, and it's very much sort of resonates with HS2's strategic goals and objectives and the client aspirations, along with the values of EKFB. And I just wanted to highlight that because it's clear that sustainability is core to that, and it's embedded as part of what we do, and certainly it's a core aspect of what we perceive to be value for money. Most economical pricing, along with delivering benefits and delivering a positive impact. And a lot of those positive impacts do sit in the sustainability, the broad sustainability agenda, whether that's delivering apprenticeships, skills employment, low carbon, reducing waste, optimizing logistics, delivering best-in-class safety, so an ethical, responsible procurement. So I thought to try and articulate and give you a sort of visual representation of our overarching sustainable procurement strategy and approach, that we try and put that together in a sort of high-level procurement model, which I guess you could look at as a very simplified process flow chart, in which we've got some inputs, which are our key drivers, and then we've got some process in the middle, which is our governance and an enabling toolkit, and ultimately the output will be delivering a sustainable legacy for the project. So in terms of key drivers, I guess those are the things that we're setting out to deliver. We're very fortunate. We've had a very aspirational client in HS2 that have very much set the tone of what they wanted to deliver from the very off, and they've selected us on the basis that we can support in delivering their strategic goals and objectives. So those objectives, along with the works information and things that we're contracted to deliver, that's really helped enable us to and give us some freedom to do something a bit different, which is informed our vision, enabled us to set our own set of goals and objectives within the sustainability space, and ultimately deliver and develop a really sort of comprehensive sustainable procurement plan, which ultimately governs a lot of what we're going to talk about today. And a nice cheesy animation for you there, but I guess the key message here is that these drivers and this input, these should be the sort of golden thread that is woven through everything we do. For all your governance, for all your procedures and your enabling toolkit, that those drivers should be considered at all stages. So just a little bit on the governance that we've put in place to deliver our sustainability goal. We've very much tried to align ourselves in what we do with this sort of life cycle based approach to the principles of ISO 2400, which is the international standard for sustainable procurement. We've been engaged with Action Sustainability in the supply chain school for some years, and very much liked what they were doing with development of this standard, and so we thought it'd be the best in class approach would be to try and align ourselves to that. So that's something we use as I guess a bit of a baseline to sanity check what we're doing, and we're doing it in the right way, and we've got all the right control measures in at all the right stages of our procurement process. We've developed some sustainable procurement and responsible sourcing policies, which again are key to governing what we do and form a core part of our approach to sourcing and our procurement decisions. And then we've developed some sort of granular procedures that just really make sure that we're not playing lip service to this. We've got these sustainable procurement requirements baked into business as usual. And I guess audit there is important. It's always important to look back, isn't it? It's always important to test, are you practicing what you preach? So we have some really good sort of audit regime in place on a sort of annual basis under our ISO 14001 obligations to make sure we are doing this. Moving on to the enabling toolkit, and this is what I'm really here to talk a bit more with you all about today is just some of the tools that we've developed that we really feel are having an impact and leveraging the sustainable outcomes. But yeah, these are the key enablers, and we've got these sort of embedded at the key stages of the procurement life cycle. And one being the sustainability assessment, which is identifying our risks and opportunities. We do that at the very early kind of planning phases of developing procurement strategies. As we move into sort of sourcing and selecting the right suppliers, we've got some really good control measures in place for delivering business assurance, and that in itself has its own set of sustainability related requirements. And then as we move through into a sort of procurement tendering kind of phase of our life cycle, we've got our balanced scorecard, which is really a core fundamental part of everything we do, and is what is helping us identify what the best value propositions look like, and getting our supply chain to commit to delivering benefits in the sustainability space. And finally, we'll touch on our sustainability reporting tool, which is also really important in terms of you need to be able to measure what you're doing, you need to be able to baseline what good looks like, and you need that feedback loop back into what you're doing to help improve where you're not quite delivering where you thought you would be. So if you get all of that right, the idea is that we'll deliver some sustainable outcomes and some real impacts for the project and the client and the taxpayer. Okay, so as we move into our enabling toolkit, the first part of the process is the planning phase and the need for understanding, I guess, the nuances of individual procurement packages. So to do this, we developed a sustainable procurement heat map, forms a sort of core part of our dependency to our sustainable procurement plan. But the idea of this is to really appraise all of our packages that we're looking to procure and sort of hone in on where the sort of sustainability impacts are, whether they be risks from, for example, a modern slavery perspective, or whether it be, we feel there's a big opportunity for improvement in that space. So the heat map really looks to sort of give you a nice visual representation of what you're procuring and where the hotspots are to enable you to sort of target those and look to leverage value in those areas. So this is what it looks like. There isn't a real exact science to this heat mapping tool. It's very much a common sense approach, and it's a living document. So as the project evolves and as we understand more and more about certain packages, this may change. But what it does do is it just enables a really good visual picture to where you need to focus your efforts, or where you can leverage your procurement and engagement with the supply chain to deliver an impact in addressing these hotspots. So either mitigating risk or maximizing opportunity. So this is the approach we took across the kind of key broad sustainability areas, whether it's sort of socio-economic impacts, or whether it's environmental or business ethics or sustainable procurement. So we appraise our packages in that way, and that really helps drive and inform our acquisition strategies, where we're going to weight our balanced scorecard to maximize the output. Because ultimately, if you go out to the supply chain and tenderers and you ask them to deliver a value-based proposition that's weighted heavily on, for example, how you're going to deliver apprentices across your workforce, and that's weighted, let's say 10% of the overall tender value, then that's really going to trigger a response, and that's how the market will look to tailor their submissions to score highly in those areas. So that's the sort of philosophy we've applied, and what we've done to, I guess, enable these hotspots is we've come up with a kind of action matrix, which ultimately, where we've got 1s and 3s and 5s, red, amber, greens on the heat map, what does that actually mean in terms of what we're going to do to deliver sustainable procurement? So we've come up with a sort of, this is what we do as business as usual. This is baked into our daily procedures and processes and tools. So, we don't have to worry too much about doing anything extra for those. We're comfortable that if we just follow our business procedures, will be delivering, some, sustainable outcomes, and considerations where they're needed. Where we need to be doing something differently and going the extra mile is where we've got the 3s and the 5s. So we've come up with this sort of standard action matrix that can be applied to the heat map, and there will be stuff that is unique and needs to be tailored specifically for a particular package, but we're finding this is really helping us approach this in a proactive, targeted way, and understand where, because at the end of the day, all of this takes resource, and it enables us to focus our resource where it's going to drive the maximum impact. So that's the business planning side of things. We've then got some sustainability and responsible sourcing consideration baked into our business assurance, our sourcing, so that when we're pre-qualifying and selecting onboarding our suppliers, that we're selecting suppliers that are sustainable themselves, have got good management systems in place for dealing with their environmental impacts, and they're sourcing their own materials and things in relation to delivery of their works in a responsible, ethical way. We're also using Compete For, which is kind of, I guess, the key enabler for our inclusive approach to procurement, in making sure that we reach out to a wider supply chain and engage diverse businesses. And this is the kind of mechanism for doing a pre-qualification. We've aligned ourselves to the Common Assessment Standard for subcontracting, PAS 91, to our onboarding of suppliers and consultants. And really that just gives us a level of confidence that from a business assurance legislation perspective, that all of our supply chain, from a business ethics perspective, we're all covered in terms of modern slavery, anti-corruption, bribery, bullying, fair working practices, employee relations. So that gives us a really good level of confidence that all the businesses we on board are the ones we should be working with and the responsible employers. And then from a subcontracting perspective, it gives us a level of assurance that they're competent, safe people. We're also driving the need for our sort of suppliers of construction-based materials to be ISO accredited to 9001, 14001, 45001. Obviously, with 14001 being the sort of key one there for driving the sort of environmental management and sustainability agenda. And we're also asking that suppliers of major construction materials are sourcing responsibly from BES 6001 certified sources, FSC Timber and CARES approved. So the balanced scorecard, this is our sort of core tool that forms a large part of our tendering process and the qualitative assessment we do at that stage. It's a great tool and is been a great success for us to date. And I guess key part of and importance of getting the tool right is that cross-functional input and buy-in. So we spent a lot of time getting our subject matter experts from our cross-functional disciplines to have their input to what good looks like, what they're looking for in terms of best practice and best-in-class approaches and methodologies for health and safety, operational delivery, environment, sustainability. They've all had their input as to what they want to see, what they want to ask the supply chain, and how they want to score what good looks like. So that's a really crucial part of getting your stakeholders bought into the process and ultimately bought into the recommendations that you make at the end of your tenders. Linking back into the heat map, that very much sort of drives how we weight certain packages. So we know there's a big positive impact or big risk to be managed in the sustainability agenda for a particular package. Whether, for example, let's say if we're procuring blue collar labour and we know there's an opportunity to deliver jobs for unemployed or apprentices, then we'd look to weight the skills, employment, and education section of the scorecard heavily to drive that outcome. And equally, another example could be in if we were procuring aggregates or ready mixed concrete, we'd be very much looking to drive the low carbon agenda and looking for logistics optimization and things, and that's been core to the engagement and procurement of our strategic partners in that space. And I know we've had some fantastic successes with the railhead that we've delivered at Calvert, and all of the road movements and things that that's enabled to take off the road. So hopefully that gives you a bit of context to how we might weight the scorecard there. It's an objective approach to tendering, so it helps take away a lot of subjectivity and bias, from stakeholders or people potentially having their favourites. So it's very quantifiable. We've spent a lot of time thinking about how we can do that, because when we first started off on our journey in ECI phase, we did some procurement with the first iteration of the scorecard. We felt that it very much favoured good bid writing, and sometimes it was very difficult to sort of cut through corporate gloss and high level policy and things to actually see what tangible commitments the tenderers were making. So a lot of work's gone into refining the scorecard and making it a lot more objective and commitment focused, which is now really starting to deliver some value. And yeah, it drives best practice. I truly think that the scorecard is looking for best practice to be demonstrated by our tenderers. And I think anyone that is involved in one of our tenders and responds to the scorecard, if they're unsuccessful, I think they certainly go away and think about how they can look to improve going forward and look to sort of develop that best practice within their own businesses. So we think there's that feedback loop there and continuous improvement sort of benefit that it could have. And lastly, we're confident it will deliver innovation, benefits and legacy for the project. Okay, so the last enabling tool, and a really important one, is what we're doing in the delivery stage of the life cycle. So that's when we've got our preferred suppliers into contract. We've got some commitments from them baked into their contracts, and KPIs around legacy and sustainability that is ultimately their commitments bid during the tender. But yeah, we need to measure what we're doing. We need to be able to baseline where the supply chain's at, and ultimately, hone in and target our engagement through the life of the contracts and our performance management to ensure people are delivering what they said they would, but ultimately where we are having some challenges, which I'm sure we'll face, that we're really looking to improve in those areas. And so to do that, we've procured and implemented the sustainability reporting tool through Action Sustainability, and we've partnered with the Supply Chain Sustainability School to really look to improve what we're doing in this space and develop the supply chain. So there's a good graphic here which shows you the sort of high level dashboard of our sustainability metrics, which all feeds into the client and our performance reporting requirements into them. So it's a cloud-based platform which enables the supply chain to access and easily upload their sustainability performance data. And it gives us a really nice visual sort of traffic light system as to where we're delivering our targets and where we're not, and gives us some great feedback as to what we need to go and do to improve that. What we're also doing with the supply chain school then is the output from the sustainability reporting tool is feeding back into our partnership page and the learning pathways that we're developing with the supply chain school, so that we can really then look to target the development of our supply chain and show some tangible improvement through that feedback loop back into the reporting. Okay, so that's it for the enabling toolkit, and I just wanted to finish on some sort of final key messages that I guess I hope would send you away with some things to think about, and how maybe you could go back into your own businesses and really look to drive the sustainable procurement agenda. Firstly, I'd say from experience, there's a lot of sort of box tick kind of approach to sustainability and sustainable procurement, and you put a nice glossy wordy policy in place, so that means you're going to deliver sustainability, but in my experience, you need to commit over and above that. You need to try and embed this into your daily working practice, to what you do, decisions you make as part of your procurement. And so I think it's an important message that having a glossy policy isn't enough. You need to go a step further. I think it's important, going back to the heat map, to, you can't expect to go out there and make a transformational change overnight. Don't try to boil the ocean. Identify your business impacts, through the nature of what you do. Is your main environmental impact production of waste or production of carbon? Really try and think about how you can have a positive improvement in those areas. Small incremental wins will lead to a step change. So I really believe if we all collectively, make a difference in the businesses and the roles we operate, I think the small incremental positive impacts will ultimately lead to a step change for the industry. I don't think there's one silver bullet that's going to change things overnight. So, we all chip away at it. I'm sure, that will help change. Persistence pays off. I think there's a natural sort of human tendency to think that, we look for a quick turnaround, a quick return on investment, don't we? And I think these things that happen overnight. We've spent at EKFB 5 years developing these strategies, plans, procedures, policies, toolkit, and we're only now starting to really see. We're still at the start of the journey in terms of delivery. We've done loads of procurement. We've got loads of nice contracts in place with lots of great commitments from our supply chain, but there's still a lot of work to be done in engaging our supply chain in doing that performance management piece, development piece. It takes a lot of time. So, you need to persist with it, you need to be patient. But ultimately, if you're approaching this in the right way, it will pay dividends eventually, I'm sure. And lastly, just the importance that we all have a role to play in whatever we do. We're all conscious of the sustainability impacts we're having, and I guess what we can do within our own roles to help leverage improvements. I'm sure we can do that. Okay, lovely little animation there, and that's it from me. So look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Chris. That was fascinating. If I can just pick up on a couple of points from your last slide there, especially on a project on the scale of FHS2. Obviously, it is important that the small incremental wins will lead to a change. On a small project, obviously they may not make a difference, but on your scheme, obviously it's vital, and those, as you say, the small steps will lead to something bigger on a project of that scale. And I think the message coming out around COP26 this week as well is that we do all have a role to play. So whether it's in your own day-to-day work, life, and professional capacity in general, I think we do all have a role to play in the bigger picture. So it is important to focus on that. I do have one question on the chat, actually, and it is, what is a minority-driven organisation, which was mentioned in one of your earlier slides?
Well, that's probably a terminology issue there. It's actually minority-led, so it's like diverse business representation. So that's one of the HS2 requirements, is to measure the diversity of our supply chain from a sort of local SME perspective, but also from a minority-led perspective. So whether that might be BAME-led, disability-led, or female-led.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Things that sort of struck me from Chris's presentation in particular was one of his earlier slides that kind of really quite clearly showed how you've got the external environment working with an organisation who then puts structures and policies and procedures in place, and then they've developed these kind of actionable toolkits underneath that actually then delivers on what the organisation has set out to do. And it really kind of shows quite neatly that kind of partnership approach, I guess, to a certain extent, between your customers and the external market, and then how the business operates within that. And I guess I'm just trying to see where the Institute of Quarrying, the Institute of Asphalt Technology kind of fits in with all of that, really, and what could we do as institutes to really maximise the benefits of that approach to a sustainable procurement policy?
Certainly from IAT's point of view, it's facilitating events like this to get the topic on the agenda, to get people talking about it, to increase people's awareness of it for our members. But again, I mean, we run things like this for our membership. We are membership organisations, both of us, but that's about increasing each individual and each member's professional capacity, their professional awareness and professional development. And really that's what we want to do, is deal with, treat those individuals to the best possible knowledge sharing platforms that we can. We want to educate ourselves, educate our peers in how to do things best. And really we do that between events like this, by sharing with other institutions like we are doing today ourselves, but outside that wider remit. And I know, James, you and I have talked about it before. We have plans to maybe widen the scope of that, and maybe if you want to pick up from there and talk about some of the other things we can do as an institute, or as institutions working together.
Yes, thanks, Lyle. Yeah, I think today's presentations have probably reinforced some of the messages that came out of yesterday's presentation. Again, I think it's been mentioned a couple of times that the solutions that we need around the sustainability and agenda, we all have to play our part in that. And I think that is necessarily then driving that collaborative approach to finding those solutions. I think Chris mentioned it. There's not one magical silver bullet in this. And going back to something we said yesterday, is that that there are some sort of high tariff elements that are clearly going to make a significant change, but we haven't got time to just focus on those. We all have to do our piece. And I think from our perspective as institutes, perhaps playing facilitators to link our members and our sectors with the supply chain more fully, so we can understand that process from design through planning, procurement, construction, operation to end of life, to say actually collectively how we're addressing those issues from the full life cycle, if you like, to ensure that we are maximizing the efficiency and hitting those targets in terms of carbon reduction, particularly across the whole of that life cycle. And I guess I think we all have to do our piece, and I think for us it's an area that we collectively, because we have networks, can help to sort of bring those networks together, hopefully.
Good, thank you, James. Yeah, and that's really what we want to do going forward. James, you've put a question in the chat. Do you just want to ask it to Chris there while you're unmuted?
Yeah, fine. I mean, it was really interesting to see the approach that HS2 have taken and Chris's organisation has taken. So I think clearly you've got the sustainability reporting tool with some very clear metrics there. And again, I'm guessing you're presenting that back to your supply chain to understand how well that's been received, if you like, in terms of your supply chain.
It's a good question, and I'd like to say that we just switched it on and everyone started playing ball, but it's we have been configuring the tool since the beginning of the year to get it right and to make it as sort of easy to use and intuitive as possible. And there's been a lot of engagement with supply chain as part of the rollout in getting them registered, getting them trained on how to use the system, and to educate them on the benefits that it can bring to their businesses. So it's it's still ongoing. It's there's still a lot of work going into getting that rollout and getting that training and engagement right. But it's we're getting some really good data and reporting now back from the supply chain, and that's really helping inform our sort of strategy. But we've had to be targeted. We've had to look at the low-hanging fruit and target our kind of major subcontractors, our strategic partners first, because that's where a lot of the opportunity is. And we'll just as time goes on, we'll keep looking to sort of get down to the different tiers of our supply chain, because it's not just a tier one initiative. We're looking to get this data from our sub-tier supply chain as well, because they all have an important part to play in this as well. So yeah, baby steps, like with everything in this space, but we're we'll get there. And just quickly, if you don't mind, going back to the conversation prior to this one, one thing I would say is that certainly from our experience, innovation has a huge role to play in this agenda and driving it forward, and looking at alternative green products and things. And one thing that we've seen is that the design process can be a real blocker, and the sort of rigid standards we have in the sort of civils and construction space. So I don't know whether there's anything the Institute's Quarrying and Asphalt Technology can do to influence that, or help facilitate getting innovative new products and ways of doing things in front of designers, in front of the people that look, that govern the standards. But otherwise we end up in this vicious cycle of concurrent design and delivery, and that's just not conducive to getting any of these products properly tested and considered within standards.
Thanks, Chris. That's a really good point, and it is something I know we encourage is the innovation through our members.
Chris, it's Martin. Sorry for the question. It was just a really interesting one yesterday that I guess Kirsten was pointing towards almost the next generation of, where schemes and projects are looking for sustainability, either benefits or disbenefits. So, you kind of rightly pointed out there, didn't you, that, huge progress and or significance that you made in, the freight modal shift, with the rail heads, taking off kind of road and kind of putting onto rail. And it was just, she was then kind of looking beyond that, saying, what are the positive externalities that you should then be starting to measure against, the pollution, the traffic on ancillary, road networks, the benefit for pushing employment of HGVs into other sectors that need the goods to be moved, kind of quicker, faster than having HGV drivers tied up hauling aggregates. Instead they can move things like food or the white goods to feed the society. So she was talking, which kind of I think broadened my understanding of where we needed to look to derive either benefit or disbenefit, and I just wasn't sure where you were in your thinking as a kind of scheme and project, whether you started to factor those in. You mentioned very much around weighting the scoring in kind of tenders, and evaluation around key elements that you see where the value is coming from, and were you using some of these externalities now in your calculations or your thoughts as you go forward? That was really the question was coming from. Sorry, because I thought it really opened up our minds yesterday and how broad she was thinking around the whole sustainability and or the environments in which you're all kind of working and trying to create.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a really good question, really, and actually it's it's open mind to that, my mind to that thought process as well. I mean, it's sort of like the consequential indirect impacts that we're having.
Yep.
And I guess, it's probably fair to say that our current approach isn't looking a great deal further than the end of our nose in terms of the initial direct impact we're having and our supply chains having, and relying upon, I guess, them to provide us the data of how they understand their impacts. I know there's a lot of clever stuff going into our sort of carbon reduction modelling, and there's some real sort of science that sits behind that. And again, I think that's looking at, that's sort of aligned to the PAS 2080 standard, so that's looking at sort of whole life carbon. So that's probably looking further ahead than just our sort of capital and embedded carbon in the structures we're building. But yeah, in terms of sort of wider sort of impacts that we're having outside of just by doing what we're doing, I think that's a great question, and maybe something I'll take back to the supply chain action sustainability and our sort of sustainability leads, and to see how we give that some consideration.
For example, in Briam, we know that they moved away from, I guess, kind of some of the 1D statements saying using a recycled product on your scheme gets a higher score, to, well, actually, where is that recycled product coming from versus the use of a natural resource that maybe actually located on the project, so that by the time we factored in the ancillary costs of transport and or some of the other externalities that go with getting that recycled resource to the project, actually you're better off using the natural resource because it's got a lower carbon footprint and or the impacts that go with it. So which is interesting because we face a lot of times in kind of specifications where a product is deemed more sustainable because it is recycled or secondary, or it's come from a certain source. But if it travels off around the world, it's not necessarily the case when you factor in the other bits that go with it, specifically the transport and all the locations. So certainly in Briam they started to factor that in, which I think is a really positive step for all of us, when we're looking at our projects.
No, I mean that argument is something we've recently, had to give some thought. There's a huge kind of movement at the moment, and lots of talk of the use of HVO fuels. And obviously that's great when it's coming from a byproduct, but it's one of those things of how scalable is it, and when you do scale it up, and you then start having to look further afield for your source of HVO in it, and it needs to come from palm oil, then that's driving a whole different ethical and responsible sourcing problem. So you do have to weigh these things up, and to certainly make sure you've got the balance there.
Great. Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks, Martin, for your question. Thank you, Chris, for your answer. And just to round up, I suppose John's comment in the chat, it deals with exactly that, and that is defining the limits of the study and how far out or down the supply chain you measure.